to fight on the landing ground.
Thank you for joining us. You are listening to A Radio, and this is the Morning Moment. Please click on the follow button on Spreaker.com. This is our first Morning Moment of the new year, so I have to wish you Happy New Year. I don't have to wish you, but I do wish it. So it's fitting that we start with the biggest threat to Canada's future as we know it. This piece is from the Washington Post, an American publication, and I'm going to predict right now that Trudeau will use this new attack on freedom of the press and its people to shut down all foreign media. By that I mean, of course, Fox News in Canada. They will also attempt to go after social media. Now, clearly anyone with a brain can see that our charter, our constitution, is being trampled on by this liberal communist government, and that the duty of a loyal, and by that I mean loyal to the Charter and the Constitution, party of opposition should be doing their duty. It is their first duty to protect any attack on Canada's freedoms. That's the duty of a loyal opposition. We must not allow this leader and this party to go unchallenged. We must fight them at the ballot box. We must fight them on the street corner with banners of truth, banners that stand for Canada and Canadians' freedoms. I want to give you a flavour of this piece, and I want to ask you, when is enough for you? When are you going to stand? When are you going to start saying to your elected representative, you cannot do this? This is unconstitutional. And when are our courts going to hold up our highest law? When is our Supreme Court going to strike down these laws and others like them? When? This piece is headed, Justin Trudeau's terrible new election rules will limit citizen activism. Those aren't my words. Those are the words of the Washington Post, and that's their title. Here's part of the piece. Stories of eroding democracy loom large in the global press these days. The alleged culprits are usually flamboyant strongmen with open authoritarian objectives, but democracy can just as easily be weakened in progressive nations by its own purported saviours through quiet bureaucratic means. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's government recently passed more than 200 pages of dramatic changes to the way that Canadian elections work. Among other things, the new rules will further restrain the degree that Canadians can exercise their constitutional rights to free political speech and activism. Such regulations passed with standard progressive smugness that heavily regulating political speech and activity in the name of fairness and equality is unambiguously virtuous. Righteous self-confidence, however, does not negate the practical consequences of this fundamentally illiberal exercise of state power. Trudeau's final bill represents no improvement on the draconian first draft introduced in April. According to the Democratic Institutions Ministry, the new legislation seeks to ensure that political actors, unquote, operate on a, quote, fair and level playing field and will impose, quote, reasonable limits, unquote, on their budgets. Translated into English, this means the government has devised new ways to punish politically motivated groups of Canadians, be them environmentalists, social conservatives, business or labour leaders, minority leaders, activists or anything in between who engaged in activities such as advertising, canvassing door to door, making telephone calls to electors or organising rallies, unquote, without first conforming to Ottawa's rules. Canada's formal election period is now capped to 50 days before the election, with the 2 months or so before the compromising a novel pre-election period as well. During the pre-election time, a concept that has no democratic rationale beyond the government's expansive appetite to control political activity, so-called third parties are treated with as much suspicion as during the tightly regulated elections themselves. Groups and individuals may not spend more than $700,000 on, quote, partisan activities and partisan advertising during this period, and must immediately register with the government after spending their first $500. Ottawa expects a full itemised list of revenue and expenses incurred, including the date, place, and every attempt to change a mind. Thanks to these amendments and others, Canada Elections Act is now impossibly long and frighteningly intimidating. Any Canadian who plans to exert any significant expense or effort in persuading his or her fellow citizens to vote one way or another in next year's election should immediately retain a team of lawyers and accountants, as there is simply no other way to navigate the dense brush of legal weeds that now govern election-adjacent democratic participation in Canada. I don't know what that means. I'll say it again. That now govern election-adjacent democratic participation in Canada. Rule breakers can expect thousands of dollars in fines or even prison time. I just want my American friends to listen to that. You could face prison time for trying to persuade someone to vote in the opposite direction. Doesn't sound like a democratic country to me. Anyway, the article continues. Things will almost certainly get worse. The paradoxical dream of a perfectly controlled democracy that inspired Trudeau's Elections Modernisation Act and the many terrible prior election laws it builds upon is a fundamentally authoritarian project for forever finding fresh justification to further constrain citizens' rights. Now that piece was quite a mouthful. I don't speak in those flowery words, so I'm going to put it in simple terms. Trudeau and the Liberal Communists in Canada are trying to muzzle anyone who doesn't agree with them. That's it, plain and simple. And you can read the whole piece at the Washington Post. But I'm going to end with this. How can we, as a democratic country, or we claim to be, let this stand? Or maybe you just don't care about freedom and democracy. Maybe you just don't care. You can find more at aradio.wordpress.com, where you can find links to us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Gab and email. You can now find us on Spotify. Just go to the podcast section and type Canadian Politics with a Twist and you'll find us. We are continuing to reach out to you, so please pass on the links. Please click on the follow button on Spreaker.com. You can listen to all my morning moments at Spreaker.com under A Radio, that's EHRADIO, A Radio, and please click on the like button. And you can find all my podcasts and morning moments at aradio.wordpress.com and click on the Morning Moments tab.